It sure wasn't pretty, Miami Dolphins Nation and Houston Texans Nation, but it's the game that counts. Houston Texans, Miami Dolphins. This is Dolphins Post Game, and those two teams are the topic of conversation right now on Sports for Beginners and streaming on the Ice and Behind the Benches. Let's go, go, go. Fins up.
Welcome to Sports for Beginners. This is the show where I cover the Pittsburgh Penguins, Toronto Blue Jays, and take you on a journey through the world of sports. From the fans' perspective, here is your host, Scott McGregor. Let's have some fun.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Dolphins Post Game, available right here on Sports for Beginners and, of course, on the ice and behind the benches. With you, as always, for Dolphins football on Sports for Beginners. My name is Thomas McGregor. Let's get everything we need to know about the Texans and the Dolphins underway. It is week 15 of the NFL season. And with Christmas just basically next week around the corner, it's basically next week, everybody. That means we only have 3 weeks left of regular season football, and it's time to get ready for the Super Bowl. Head coaches, as always, for the Miami Dolphins, it is Mike McDaniel, and our head coach of the Houston Texans, I do believe, has not changed since last season, but let's just check out for the Houston Texans in case anything was being made. There were some notes going on shortly before all of the 1 o'clock p.m. games got started. D'Amico Ryans is indeed the head coach of the Houston Texans. So, of course, the quarterbacks in this game would be for the Miami Dolphins. We have Tua on the Miami Dolphins side. But who got the quarterback for the Houston Texans in this game, where they ended up beating the Miami Dolphins in a one-score game, 20 to 20 to 12? Well, the quarterback in this matchup with Stefon Diggs facing Tua Tagovailoa for the second straight time in this football game, the quarterback would be in the Houston Texans' favor. We would have CJ Stroud be one of the quarterbacks. I believe that's CJ Stroud. I think that's CJ Stroud. I think, yes, it would indeed be CJ Stroud, number 7. He is the quarterback for the Houston Texans. He would be the quarterback for this matchup with Iguodala, Mixon, Duell, and of course a bunch of other teammates on this action, including Stefon Diggs. Although Stefon Diggs, it looks like he was not seen in this game. He is a part of the Houston Texans roster, as we know. He is a part of the Houston Texans roster. All right. Most of you may be getting this on the Sunday of the time of our recording, which is December 15th, 2024. But most of you who are Texans fans and most of you who are Dolphins fans may be getting this on a regular Monday if you're a Dolphins fan, because it's not a victory Monday for the Miami Dolphins. We don't like that. But it also could be a victory Monday or victory Sunday to you, Houston Texans fans. And we're going to now figure out why it's a victory Monday or Sunday for you, Houston Texans fans. As well as, I do want to mention, just before we get into breaking down the game, that we will be keeping tabs on the late afternoon window between the 4:25 start games, which are just about ready to get going. And as also, we have some Sunday night football to get to and some Monday night football to get to. We'll talk about Sunday Night Football's game, and we'll talk about the Monday night doubleheader just before we get into what's next for the Dolphins and what's next for the Houston Texans. And if there's time, we may get into some game balls. But if there is indeed a victory speech, we did this with the Green Bay Packers. We might do it with the Houston Texans on this game. We might bring the Houston Texans victory speech in, but if there's no victory speech, I think there's a reason behind that, but we will see where all things go from there. So happy Victory Sunday to all of you Houston Texans fans out there, and happy Sunday to all of you Miami Dolphins fans out there. You know, there is a saying in this game, there is a saying in this game with the Dolphins losing to this game. There is a saying that the Miami Dolphins and the Houston Texans playing a little bit of a dangerous football game. We do have to mention off the top of the show before we get into breaking down how the scoring happened. I do want to kind of bring up the fact that Grant Dubois, or I'm going to call him Grant D, did suffer an injury that would become a touchdown in one of the plays in this game. He had to be carted off. By the time you're listening to this, you probably already know this. He had to be carted off the field and taken into a medical hospital, receiving treatment. So, our thoughts and our prayers with Grant and his loved ones for hoping that he's all right and hoping that he got, a recovery that he needs to take care of. But other than that, how did this game go down? Well, it kind of starts with field goal territory with Kerry Fairburn getting a 44-yard field goal attempt up and good. Jay Weeks, the holder, and I believe his name is T. Townsend with the center. He is the no, he is the holder. T. Townsend is the holder, and Jay Week is the center. It would be up and good. So it would be 3-0 after one quarter of play for the Texans, and the Houston Texans had the 3-point lead over the Miami Dolphins. Time that the quarter had on the game clock for this play was at 7 minutes and 12 seconds. I usually do that for Maple Leaf Post recap when we talk about scoring, but I'm going to do that on this one just for sake of the term dangerous football was being played in here, and we're going to get more into it, but we're not going to dive as far into it as we possibly want to. So basically, after one quarter of play, it's Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins down 3-0 over the Houston Texans and DeMarco Ryans. He has, of course, the 3-point lead over Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins. Jason Sanders nails a 55-yard field goal to keep the Dolphins in it, and this was a 55-yard field goal attempt. We are tied at 3 points apiece. CJ Stroud, what does he do next? Well, at 6 minutes and 45 seconds, after 11 minutes and 40 seconds into the early half of the first quarter of play, Jason Sanders 55-yard field goal attempt from him with Z Turner, the center, and of course the holder, Jay Bailey. Jay Stroud passes short middle, completed catch made by Nico Collins for a 6-yard touchdown. Extra point by K. Fairburn, and it is now 10-3 in favor of the Texans at 6:45 left to go in the first quarter's second half quarter of play. I would say no, the first half quarter of play, second quarter of the first half, with literally just 3 ticks to go in the first half quarter of the second quarter to play in the first of two halves in this game. The Houston Texans kicker Fairburn with a 23-yard field goal attempt up and good. J. Weeks and P. Townsend with the hold and the center, and they would go up 13-6 in favor of the Houston Texans for the Miami Dolphins, as they would have just 6 points to the Houston Texans is 10. But the Texans 10, the Dolphins 6 going into half. But what could happen in the second half of play? What could happen in the second half of play with only 3 quarters, or rather 2 quarters left to play? So you have 2 quarters played, now you have 2 more quarters to play. Well, here's what really happened. Third quarter rolls around, and it's CJ Stroud making a short right completed catch by Nico Collins for again 6 yards, and it's a touchdown. K. Fairburn, extra point is up. It's good. That takes just 11 minutes and 12 seconds to do it. And we have the final score points for the Houston Texans. It's 20-6 in favor of the Houston Texans over the Miami Dolphins. So now 20 take away the 6 points the Miami Dolphins have. The Miami Dolphins are down by 14. So you figure, okay, what's going to happen here? Maybe the Dolphin season is over, Miami Dolphins station. Maybe it's over. Maybe it's over. Maybe it's over. Tua said, "Not on my watch, you don't. You're not taking me down 2 scores again. You're not taking me down 2 scores again like Buffalo had done for us in this season. You're not taking me down like Buffalo did in the 2 games this week against the Buffalo Bills for the Miami Dolphins this season." And so what does Tua do? He passes short right, a catch completed to Jay Smith. Jay Smith for 7 yards, a touchdown. But wait a minute, there's illegal contact for a 5-yard decline on KL for the Houston Texans. The penalty is declined, and so results will be in a touchdown that Jay Smith will get for 7 yards. It will be a touchdown, and of course, there was a penalty on the play during a missed field goal attempt, but that was halted off. And Tua Tagovailoa makes a catch to Jay Smith for 7 yards, and that would be about all that the Dolphins would get. That would be all they would get. They would get 12, but nothing more. So while it was a one-score game, nonetheless, they would only score 12 more points, leaving us down with an 8-point win for the Houston Texans in Houston, or rather the venue in NRG Stadium. NRG Stadium would see the Houston Texans pull off a victory and go from the record that they were at, which, if I believe correctly, was 8-5 on the season. They go to 9-5 on the season, heading into the 16th week of the NFL season. Miami Dolphins go from a 6-7 record to a 6-8 record, falling to the Houston Texans at 9-5 on the season right now, 20-12 in this contest. All right, so there you go, Dolphins Nation. There you go, Texans Nation. The Texans beat the Miami Dolphins 20-12. Their record 9-5 heading into Week 16. The Dolphins record 6-8 heading into Week 16. Dolphins are still pretty much alive in this playoff race, but for how long the Dolphins Nation wants to ask the Miami Dolphins, well, unfortunately, That one we can tell you is unclear at this point, but right now they're still in it, so they have a chance at coming in to the postseason, but where does it lie? We'll see where it lies. So plenty more to come here on Dolphins postgame, but let's take a time out here on Dolphins postgame and get ready for the game stats portion of Dolphins postgame to see how the Dolphins and the Texans had their time of possession, how many first downs they had, what were the total yardages after the game, did any of the quarterbacks throw any picks, did any of the quarterbacks get sacked, all of that, including what's next for the Texans, what's next for the Dolphins, still to come on Dolphins postgame. You're listening to Dolphins football on Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. Be right back with you in just a few minutes.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Looking for conversations on books and more, as well as tutorials on using your favorite devices and applications? You've come to the right place. Join us weekly on Spicy Techie, where Ali and Sienna provide insightful conversations, as well as useful tips and tricks to help you along on your technological journey. To learn more, tune into the show and like the Spicy Techie Facebook page. Search for Spicy Techie.
Looking for a sports podcast that covers sports weekly as well as gets you set up for the day? Check out Weekly in Sports with me, Scott McGregor. We give some shout-outs of the week to podcasts like this one and those who do them. Discuss the Blue Jays, Bill, Raptors, and more. To learn more, check out the Sports for Beginners Facebook page. Search Sports for Beginners.
If you're a Maple Leafs Nation fan in Miami and you're tuning in to Dolphins postgame right now, don't fret, Maple Leaf Nation fans of the Miami Dolphins. We've got Maple Leaf Post recap coming for you after this game between the Leafs and the Sabres. That game getting going right now on the ice with the score being 0-0 right now. That game just got started. Was about to get started. 5 o'clock Eastern is the puck drop time. I'll have you for a Maple Leaf Post recap following the game. Reminder to Buffalo Sabre fans and Toronto Maple Leaf fans that we'll be doing it all again in Buffalo one night from a match against the Dallas Stars at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Haven't already seen the post-game recap from the Detroit Red Wings from Saturday night, I encourage you to go check it out now. But you can also stay here and keep it tuned for Dolphins post-game because we're going to be sending you off to Maple Leaf Post recap on the other side of the Maple Leafs and Sabres' final game. Back to the topic of conversation. And just before we get into the game stats of the games, I do want to make a look at our Week 15 games gone on so far. The late window is currently underway. We will probably get to some keys to victory, but the locker room speech, I mentioned that we would probably do this for the Houston Texans because we did do it on American Thanksgiving for the Green Bay Packers because I was feeling thankful for it. And we are indeed going to do it. So here is the head coach, DeMeco Ryans. DeMeco Ryans is the head coach of the Houston Texans. Here are the Houston Texans. Just for you Houston Texans fans in Houston. Just for you Houston fans listening all around the world. Here is the locker room speech from a 20-12 victory over the Miami Dolphins for the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans, take it away. All credit going to the Houston Texans and the NFL.
Hey, here we go, man. Hey, man, just couldn't be more proud of you guys. Here we go, man. Hey, man, just couldn't be more proud of you guys, man. Like, we talk about grinding it out, and we weren't worried about anything about finishing. That was what it's all about, just us finishing, and the way you guys finished that game, man, can't be more proud of everybody in here. It took everybody. Nico stepping up, 2 TDs. Great job all day, man. Great job protecting, giving us time. We talked about it. Great job. Great job. All right. And then defense. All right. Can't say enough. All right. Can't say enough. This guy, man, he got the most interceptions in the NFL in December. In the month of December, definitely, he better be defensive player of the week. Definitely better be defensive player of the month. All right. But yeah, Steen. Player of the game. Great job. Hey, probably that's probably the best play I've ever seen. All right? Best play I've ever seen. For you right there to close it out, man, ask you to cover in man coverage and lock guys up. That's what you do. Keep doing that, man. Heck of a player, proud of you, man. Way to win the game for us right there. But, hey, man, on to the next one. All right? We came out, we handled business. On to the next one. That was 1-0. All right? We move on. All right? Now, Saturday, we got another one coming up. Same thing. All right? Attack the preparation the right way. Everybody locked in, mentally, physically. Let's take care of ourselves, and let's be ready to take this show on the road to KC. Everybody good?
Sure hope everybody's good. I sure hope everybody's good for the Houston Texans. That was quite the game. That was quite the game that almost didn't even see the fourth quarter. It was almost like the third quarter was the last quarter to play. Right, I mentioned we would talk about the action going on in the late window, but let's talk about the action that's gone on so far. Just before we get into our game stats of the game, a reminder, we will do game balls of the game just before we wrap up the Dolphins and Texans. What's next for them to go? They do have, as DeMeco Ryans mentioned, they do have a game Saturday against Kansas City. Let's see how the games are going so far in week number 15. I'm going to start with the prime games from Thursday night football. We do have a double header to get you set for: the Bears and the Vikings, the Falcons and the Raiders as well. The Rams end up beating the 49ers 12-6 in what was, to our Sports for Beginners host of Bill's Post Game, what he would like to call kind of a field goal game, because it looked like it was just kind of a field goal game. You know, kickers kicking field goals, never missing a beat. Niners record going into week 16 is, of course, 6-8. Their record now 6-8. That was their 8th loss of the season. The Rams, with their victory Thursday, heading into, of course, next week, their record 8-6 on the season. They were heading into that game at, I believe, a record of 7-6, and if they picked up a W, which they did on Thursday night, that meant they would be 8-6. If they picked up an L and the Niners picked up a W, the W for the San Francisco 49ers would have been their 7th victory of the season, and they would have been one away from tying their record at 8 losses and 8 wins, with it being 7-8 going into the 16th week of the season. I believe that does check out 12-6, the final on Thursday Night Football, December 12th, 2024. Speaking of finals, the Baltimore Ravens is where we head first in New York Giants Stadium, where the New York Giants end up falling to the Baltimore Ravens 35-14. Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens improved to a record of 9-5 on the season. It's a victory Sunday or a victory Monday, whatever you call it, for the Baltimore Ravens, as they end up picking up a victory 35-14 in favor of the Ravens over the Giants. The Tennessee Titans had it in their pocket. They had the W in their back pocket, but they just could not win a 10-point game comeback from the Cincinnati Bengals, 37-27, the final in the Cincinnati Bengals' favor. The records 6-8 heading into Week 16 and 3-11 for the Tennessee Titans. Oh, it was looking good, Tyler Rowland. It was looking good, Tyler Rowland. You're the host of Locked On NFL, and you're also the host of course, Locked On Titans for the Tennessee Titans content, Monday through Friday. It was looking good. It was looking good in Tennessee's favor earlier, and then Cincinnati came up and fell the victory line with 37-27 for them to go to a 6-8 record. Into New Orleans Saints we go, and despite a tremendous effort to try and come back and win the game, try to win the game in their favor, the Washington Commanders end up going to a record of 9-5, while the Saints go to a record of 5-9, losing to the Commanders 20-19. The New York Jets end up beating the Jacksonville Jaguars, their record 4-10 heading into Week 16. The Jacksonville Jaguars record 3-11, 32-25. Kansas City Chiefs win it close, but they win actually by 2 scores in the dog pound of Cleveland, Ohio. They end up beating the dog pound of the Cleveland Browns 21-7, the final in that game. 30-14, the Dallas Cowboys come on top of the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. Both teams' records. The Kansas City Chiefs game first, 13-1 on the season for the Chiefs. They are definitely in the postseason. The Cleveland Browns, their record 3-11. It looks like their season could be dwindling in trouble zone, but we will try and keep it as positive as we can. Dallas Cowboys end up picking up their 6th out of the 8 losses they have. This is their 6th straight victory, and they find a way to get their 6th straight victory, and they could be one away from tying their win-loss record at 8 wins and 8 losses next week with a victory against their next opponent, which I'm going to talk about before the show is up. So still to come in our Week 15 matchups, we're going to get you set for the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time, just before we wrap up the show with some keys to victory. And I'm even going to provide you some of my picks for Monday night's game for those of us tuning into the show on a Monday night, with the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings taking on each other at 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time on the East Coast. And then just about 30 minutes after 8:00 p.m., it's an 8:30 start for the Las Vegas Raiders as they take on the Atlanta Falcons in the Monday night doubleheader. Before we get into the game stats, I'll just take one look at the late window games. Right now, the Buffalo Bills lead the Lions 21-14. That game in a pretty close game. The Buffalo Bills 21-14 for the Detroit Lions. The Cardinals are leading the New England Patriots 10-3 right now in the second quarter of play, approaching halftime, I should say. The Indianapolis Colts are beating the Denver Broncos 10-7, but it's still anyone's game in that one. And of course, we've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers currently falling to the Los Angeles Chargers 17-10. So that's a look at the scoreboards right now for your Houston Texans and Miami Dolphins. Look at the Week 15 games still to come. Tonight we've got the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. And then Monday night we've got the Vikings, the Bears, the Falcons, and the Raiders. What we're going to do, Dolphins Nation. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a 30-second timeout on sports for beginners after we cover just a little bit of the game, stats of the game, and we're going to also take another timeout here on the ice and behind the benches after doing what we just said for sports for beginners, covering a little bit of the game stats of this game. Our game balls of the game is still to come in the program. We will get to what's next for the Texans, what's next for the Dolphins in due time. When we come back, we'll finish off the game stats and get right into the game balls of the game for the Texans and the Miami Dolphins. So with that all in mind, for all of you on Sports for Beginners and all of you on the ice and behind the benches, appreciate you joining us on the show. The Miami Dolphins have a time of possession of 33 minutes, 24 seconds with the ball. The Houston Texans have a time of possession of 26 minutes and 36 seconds with the ball. Dolphins made around just about 18 first downs compared to the 12 first downs from the Houston Texans, of course, the Houston Texans with 12 first downs, 3 of them both rushing first downs for the Miami Dolphins, and of course the Houston Texans to the 18 for the Miami Dolphins, 18 first downs for them, 12 for the Houston Texans. 11 of those first downs came in the air from Tua Tagovailoa. 8 of them came in the air for the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans had 1 penalty marker for a first down. The Miami Dolphins had 4 first down penalty markers. That is where we'll leave the game stats for now. But just before we take those 30-second timeout on sports for beginners and a timeout on the ice and behind the benches, in terms of the yards per play, both teams were about 3.6 average yards per play for a total yardage of 224 yards for the Miami Dolphins and 181 yards for the Houston Texans, with just 62 plays called by the Dolphins and 50 plays called by the Texans. All right, the rest of the game stats when we continue on Dolphins Post Game, but for now, let's take a 30-second timeout, and this will be a 30-second timeout word from the friends who are making our day brighter, one song at a time on Sports for Beginners, plus another timeout just before we run back into the show with a special word from our host of the program, Scott McGregor, for Bills Post Game. He's got a special thing to add to the Sports for Beginners podcast. Whatever timeouts we have on the ice and behind the benches will happen at this point in the program. It is our second timeout, which will not be 30 seconds. We'll have a 30-second timeout on Sports for Beginners. We'll have it back with you in 30 seconds to finish off the game stats of the game. Game balls of the game are coming up next. Our look at the Week 15 matchups in the late window. Then, if there's time, we're getting into our game balls of the game. And of course, that's coming up next, I mentioned. But we'll have the what's next for the Dolphins, what's next for the Texans. And we'll even get some looks for on the ice and behind the benches listeners on the Maple Leafs and the Sabres game, that game currently in progress right now. Be sending you off to Buffalo Sabres and Maple Leafs hockey on Maple Leaf Post Recap as soon as that game goes final. Our keys to victory for Sunday Night Football, our picks for Monday night's doubleheader is coming up as well. And the wraparound of the game stats, that's next before the game balls of the game. When we come back in 30 seconds on Sports for Beginners, and we come back to Dolphins football right here on Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. Back in 30 seconds on Sports for Beginners and back after these words on the ice and behind the benches. You're listening to Dolphins football. My name is Thomas McGregor. We'll be right back.
CNT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down. Nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on CNT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on CNT Radio.
Dolphins 12, Texans 20, both teams done for the season against each other. What's going to happen the rest of the way for both teams, we'll find out in just a little bit later on the program for Dolphins Post Game. Keeping tabs on the late window action, which is now, I believe, into the second half of their quarters. The Eagles leading the Steelers 27-13 in the fourth quarter of action. The Colts leading the Broncos 13-10. The Bills leading the Lions 35-14. We have a 30-17 game with the Buccaneers leading the Chargers into the fourth quarter of action. And it's 23-10. The Cardinals have taken over the New England Patriots lead 23-10 into the fourth quarter of that game. All right, let's welcome you all back in the Dolphins postgame on this holiday edition, but rather Victory Sunday, Victory Monday edition of the Houston Texans games on Dolphin postgame. It's just going to be a regular Monday for us on Miami Dolphins soil. Last talked about the possessions for the Miami Dolphins and the Houston Texans. We mentioned that their total yardage was around the yardage of about 224 yards for the Miami Dolphins and 181 yards for the Houston Texans. Also mentioned the time of possession with 33 minutes and 24 seconds to the Miami Dolphins and 26 minutes 36 seconds for the Houston Texans. We gotten all that out of the way because there's still a lot of things we've done with the game stats. We are getting into the point when we be ready for the game balls of the game. Let's continue on the game stats cap off with a look at how both teams did efficiently or insufficiently on fourth down or third down. We'll start with third down efficiency as the Dolphins converted just 4 out of 13 times on third down. The Texans converted just 5 out of 13 times on third down. Both teams were perfect on fourth down. The Houston Texans only going for it in one chance that they get on fourth down, they convert. Dolphins getting a chance to convert 2 times on fourth down, and they do convert on all those chances. Now, although both teams were 3.6 average in yards per play, making 62 plays for the Miami Dolphins and just 50 plays for the Houston Texans, quarterbacks were a different story in terms of passing yards, as the Miami Dolphins had a total passing yards of 196 yards for a total of 29 completed passes out of 40 completion attempts. Just about 4.0 yards per carry for that. Tua got sacked 3 times for a loss of 24 yards. Meanwhile, CJ got sacked for a loss of 27 yards, but he got sacked 4 times in this game, making just 18 out of 26 completed passes. They make 18 completed passes out of 26, going for 131 yards, averaging just 3.5 yards per pass, getting sacked and losing only 27 yards 4 straight times. The ground game we go, and the ground game was a little sluggish here for the Houston Texans, but the same goes for the Miami Dolphins here. The Miami Dolphins, while making just 19 rushes, were only allowed to get 52 yards carry on the ground, giving them a total yards per rush of 2.7 for a total yard rush of 3.9 in just 20 rushes. The Houston Texans had the better rushing yards, gaining just 77 rushing yards on the ground. Dolphins turned over the ball 4 straight times in the game. The Houston Texans, they only turned over the ball once. Yet both teams fumbled the ball, lost 2 fumbles, and recovered 1. Dolphins were efficient for a little bit in the red zone, making just 1 conversion out of 2 tries in the red zone. Houston Texans a little bit better. They converted on just 2 tries out of the 3 chances they had in the red zone, but they also converted on just the 1 out of the 2 chances they had against the Miami Dolphins on goal to go efficiency. Dolphins didn't see a goal to go efficiency in this game. However, Tua did throw 3 picks in this game. Resulting in interceptions is the better term. CJ, on the other hand, did not throw any picks in this game and got 2 touchdowns in the air, while Tua got 1 touchdown in the air, but both teams didn't get a defensive special teams touchdown or even a rushing touchdown. So those were just let's try to get the first down kind of play. Speaking of the penalties from earlier, when we talked about how many penalties it took for a first down efficiency, noting that the Dolphins had 18 first downs and the Texans had 12 first downs. Both teams received 7 out of 64 and 70 penalties that they could get, but the Houston Texans only received about 7 penalty calls out of the 70 that they could get. Out of the 64 that the Dolphins could get, they received 8 out of 64. So 8 out of 64 penalties was what the Dolphins got, and 7 out of the 70 penalty calls the refs could have gave the Houston Texans was how many calls they gave the Texans in favor of the Texans. Of course, they do win this game, but they had 7 penalties called against them, while the Dolphins had 8 penalties called against them. All right, let's wrap up the game stats and get right into our game balls with just a little bit more of a check-in here on the late window games. Those games apparently getting close to keys to victory time here on Dolphins Post Game for the Sunday Night Football game getting set to go in about a few minutes time. And of course, those of us listening on the ice and behind the benches and our Maple Leaf fans, we are keeping tabs on the Maple Leafs game as well. That game just through 40 minutes of play. The Maple Leafs currently leading 4-3, heading into the regulation time period. The game stats that we're gonna finish off with are the Houston Texans returning the ball in return yards. 123 yards returned for them in this game. 97-yard returns for the Miami Dolphins in this game. So they returned the ball for what looks like 97 yards. The Texans had 3 interception yards for a carry of 78 yards intercepted. Setting kickoff yards, the Miami Dolphins in just 3 kickoff yards have 73 yards to the 3 kickoff yards they got. And if you look at it from a punt return, it's 3 punts for the Houston Texans for 45 yards. And it's 2 punt yards for 24 yards for the Miami Dolphins in this game. All right, let's take a look at the action still going on in this late window of action that is going on as we count down to Packers and Seattle Seahawks. It looks like all the late games are in the fourth quarter. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers leading the Los Angeles Chargers 37-17 in that game. And we've just about hit the 2-minute warning in Arizona with the Arizona Cardinals leading by 20 points, 30-10. It's a 20-point game in that one. Steelers trying to fight back for a victory against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's 13-7. It's 13-27. The Philadelphia Eagles on the ball with 27 and the Steelers with 13. Denver Broncos have found themselves into the lead. Houston Texans, but it's still very early in that game. They just started the fourth quarter with the scores 24-13. The Buffalo Bills 38-21 right now over the Detroit Lions. All late window games are in the last quarters of play, but some of these games are going to end early before the other ones go. And I think one of them just finished, but I could be wrong. We are in the 2-minute warning for the New England Patriots and the Arizona Cardinals. We've still got about 6 minutes and 20 seconds left to go in the Steelers and the Eagles game. About 6 minutes and 15 seconds to go in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. About 10 minutes and 10 seconds to go in the Denver game. 13:38 to go in the fourth quarter in Detroit, Michigan. All right, let's get some game balls out of the way here for Dolphins post game. Let's get some game balls out of the way. And you got to give credit where credit is due in this game. I'm going to start with the Miami Dolphins here. Two quick game balls from the Miami Dolphins, and then I've got game balls of the game to give out to the Houston Texans. 3 game balls in particular for them. First game ball of the game goes to Jason Sanders. Despite missing one of the extra points or the PATs for a field goal attempt, I still think he had a good game, making just 2 field goals, missing the 1 extra point, and his longest yards being 55 yards. Hey, Jason Sanders, it wasn't our best game in this game, but it wasn't your fault in this game. I give you credit for what you did. You kept us in it. You tried to get us to pull off the victory, and things just seemed to be going haywire in the game. And then, of course, he didn't stay for very long, but our prayers are with him. Grant, our prayers are with you, man. We're hoping for you to get a recovery. Come in at the second game ball of the game for the Miami Dolphins under the quick game balls of the game. I do want to issue that he did have to leave the game. He was carted off the field, but he did do what he could in this game. Against the Texans, and he did what he could, having just 1 reception, 1 target. He is minus. He did lose 2 yards, and did average minus 2 yards. But you got to give the guy credit where credit is due. Like I said with Jason Sanders, these guys try to keep themselves in the game, and you got to fight through it. Grant, you got to fight through it. I know you can do it, buddy. It's tough. I know you want it to still be able to play, but injuries will happen, buddy. I sure hope I sure hope he's okay and has a good enough recovery. And you gotta also wonder what's going through Tua's mind after throwing 3 picks. Hopefully, it's not interceptions in pick 6 touchdowns. Or when I say pick 6 touchdowns, I mean pick 6 touchdowns. Of course, it didn't end up in those areas, but he does average 4.9 yards a carry, scoring 1 touchdown. That touchdown, of course, going to Juno Smith, I believe, John O. Smith. Gotta give this guy credit where credit is due. He did make 29 completed passes out of 40 completion attempts, with the 3 interceptions he did throw in this game, going for a total of 196 yards. All right, to the Detroit Lions. But first, we had a scoring update join us into the program, as it looks like another touchdown has been scored by the Buffalo Bills. It's now 38-28. Excuse me, 44-28. It's now 44-28. The Buffalo Bills leading 44-28. But the Lions do get a touchdown pass from Jared Goff off to Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs with a 12-yard touchdown pass from Jared Goff. Josh Allen later with R. Davis. R. Davis for 5 yards. And the game is in Buffalo's favor. But for how long, I wonder, is the game in their favor? They currently lead 44-28. Which means the Lions are only down by 16. And speaking of touchdown, the Bills, as I mentioned, they lead by 16, but they actually now lead by 17 with Tyler Bass kicking it up and getting it good. First late window game to go final is in Arizona, as the Arizona Cardinals managed to beat the Patriots 30-17 in Arizona. So a victory Sunday, victory Monday to Arizona Cardinals fans. Approaching the 2-minute warning right now, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers leading the Chargers 37-17, 3 minutes and 44 seconds to go before the 2-minute warning. The Bills and Lions still have about minutes to go before they hit the 2-minute warning. It's 45-28 in favor of the Buffalo Bills, and the Denver Broncos have 24-13 on their scoreboard against the Indianapolis Colts. But still very, very early for those games. Anything can happen in those games. Anything can happen at all. Coming up on our final break of the program for both Sports for Beginners and On the Ice and Behind the Benches, the podcast on the Dolphins Post Game. If you missed it already, we'll have a victory speech in the link of the description below. You can listen to it again. It will be the victory speech from the locker room of the Houston Texans. All credit going to the Houston Texans and, of course, the NFL, as Demeco Ryans, and the Houston Texans, Demeco Ryans and the Houston Texans beat Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins 20-12 in the early action. The topic of conversation for us, the 1 o'clock action, plays at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time against the Houston Texans. The score line here, as we've wrapped up the game balls of the game, and we're getting into the game balls of the game for the Houston Texans, just to wrap it up. 3-0 Texans after 1 quarter of play in the first half. In the second quarter of play, first half of play for regulation, the Houston Texans scored 10 to add to their 3. But the Miami Dolphins do score a 6. They just don't pick up a 7 or pick up an extra point. But they do pick up field goals, and it would be 6-10 going into half. Third quarter and fourth quarter roll around. Obviously nothing to report here on the fourth quarter, but 0-0. The Texans and the Dolphins would put up a 6, but the Texans would put up a 7 instead of a 6, and therefore the Dolphins would score double sixes, leaving us with a final score of 20-12 in favor of the Texans. You know what? We're going to save the Houston Texans game balls of the game for the final portion of Dolphins post game. But coming up next, when we're done with the Houston Texans game balls of the game, what's next for the Texans? What's next for the Dolphins? And as the clock continues to roll down into the 8:20 p.m. Central Time slot of the East Coast, 8:20 p.m. is the East Coast timeline for Sunday Night Football's match in the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. Also, what are my picks to win Monday Night Football's game? All of that still to come on Dolphins Post Game, when we return in 30 seconds on the Ice and Behind the Benches, from a word from our station at Sports for Beginners, the podcast, the current runners of Dolphins Post Game. And on Sports for Beginners, we'll be back after some words from Broadcast Map and take another look at the podcast to revamp this show. The game balls of the game from the Houston Texans. What's next for the Texans? What's next for the Dolphins? All still to come when Dolphins Post Game wraps up next on Dolphins Football for Sports for Beginners and On the Ice and Behind the Benches. Back after a 30-second timeout from Sports for Beginners on the Ice and Behind the Benches, and words from Broadcast Map, and take another look on Sports for Beginners. We're back to wrap it up. Next, stay with us.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Looking for conversations on the world of broadcasting, sports media, and from time to time, my favorite sports teams? Listen to Broadcast Map with me, Ali Musa. To learn more about the show and to view the upcoming schedule, like the Broadcast Map Facebook page. Search Broadcast Map.
We're playing proud of you, man. Way to win the game for us right there. But, hey, man, on to the next one. All right? We came out, we handled business. On to the next one. That was 1-0. All right? We move on. All right? Now, Saturday, we got another one coming up. Same thing. All right? Attack the preparation the right way. Everybody locked in. Mentally, physically, let's take care of ourselves, and let's be ready to take.
Certainly hope everybody is good as we welcome you into the final edition piece of Texans and Dolphins, with the Dolphins falling in the L column against the Texans. The Texans falling in the win column. They win it against the Dolphins 20-12. And now that the Dolphins game balls are out of the way, we're back to the game balls on the final edition of Dolphins post game for this one between the Dolphins and the Texans. Host of Sports for Beginners has just alerted me that the Bills are leading by 10 points down to the final final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. We'll make one final check-in on the late games. We'll make one final check-in on the late games just before we wrap up this program, but the attendance record's coming up in just about 10 minutes time. Be even shorter than that. We are approaching the end of the program, so you know what that means. On the Ice and Behind the Benches, in just 6 minutes and 39 seconds from now, we'll be getting ready for Sabres and Maple Leafs on the Ice and Behind the Benches. For all of those listening on the Ice and Behind the Benches, I'll be with you, Maple Leafs Nation, for the Sabres and the Leafs. While on Sports for Beginners, we're setting you up for Bills Post Game, which actually had a pregame show just before the Dolphins Post Game show got started. So how about that? We'll be sending you off to Bills Post Game immediately following the game, which is down to the final 5 minutes of the play. The fourth quarter of action. Keys to victory still to come, and we're going to get to those in a matter of minutes from now. But let's get those keys of game balls of victory for the Houston Texans as they prepare to take on the Chiefs next week. Let's start with the first of the 3 game balls of the game, and I gotta give credit where credit is due. You gotta talk about CJ Stroud. You gotta talk about CJ Stroud. Mr. CJ keeping the team in it, keeping the team on victory lap, making 18 out of 26 completion attempts. 18 completed passes out of 26 completion attempts, 131 yards for him, averaged just 5 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry, 5.0 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. Yes, he got sacked 4 times in this game, lost 27 yards, but you got to give credit where credit is due. The touchdowns are what matter, and he got those touchdowns for you. So great job by quarterback CJ. Great job by quarterback CJ Stroud. He's the quarterback of the Houston Texans. Great job by CJ. Great job by CJ in this game. Great job by CJ. Great job. Great job. Great job. Keeping your team in it and making sure you guys stay in the lead. But you gotta keep. But the quarterback can't do it all. You gotta have other people to do stuff. So how about getting a game ball of the game to one of the guys responsible for some of those interception picks in Derek Stingley Jr. Derek Stingley Jr. Derek Stingley Jr. I mean, what's not to like about this guy? He had 3 of 2 tackles. He had 3 of 2 tackles in this game. And of course, 2 interceptions in this game. Great job by him on that one. And then where do I even stop with Jason Sanders? And you gotta give credit to K Fairbairn. You gotta give credit to K Fairbairn. You gotta give credit to K Fairbairn. You gotta give credit to him. He did an absolute job himself in this game, keeping things really, really steady for the Houston Texans. When things seem to be tipping over, you call in your kicker and you make sure the kicker does his job when he's got to kick an extra point, when he's got to kick a field goal. He nails 2 field goals and he nails 2 extra points. His longest yards, 44 yards. Actually, I feel like Houston deserves not 3 game balls of the game, but 4 game balls of the game. Here's the 4th game ball of the game, and that's going to, again, you gotta get credit. You gotta get credit where credit is due. And this one's going to Mr. Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 33 yards, average just 6.6 yards a carry. His longest yards, 15 yards. You can work on that. You can work on that, Joe Mixon. Surprise guy that everybody might not have been talking about unless they were watching the game live, like most of us were, or rather some of us were. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I possibly can about this. But Tank Dell, what an interesting play by this guy in just getting 2 receptions, 2 targets. He manages to go for 26 yards, averaging just 13 yards a carry, and getting 15 yards as well as his longest yardage is for play. All right, final check-in on the late afternoon games. Of course, those other late afternoon games going final. And we're about to send you off. The Bills post game on Sports for Beginners. But you maybe want to stick around for Bills post game after Maple Leaf post recap on the ice and behind the benches. keeping tabs on the NHL games as well, with now just 3 minutes to go in the Toronto game. The Toronto Maple Leafs leading 4-3. As the game ticks down to the final 2 minutes of that game, it's the close game. 4-3 is the final. Is possibly the final against the Maple Leafs, with the Sabres trailing by 1 goal. The Bills, looks like it's going to be a victory Monday, victory Sunday, whenever you be listening to Bills post game on Sports for Beginners or on the ice and behind the benches. Looks like it's going to be a victory Monday for the Bills. 38-35 48-35 is the score right now as they're into the 2-minute warning. And it looks like the Denver Broncos are going to grant the Houston Texans their wish. They got like 38 seconds left to go in this game. That game is pretty much final. The Arizona Cardinals end off the New England Patriots 30-17. The Steelers fall to the Philadelphia Eagles 27-13. Keys to victory coming up in just a matter of moments from now. But now that those late window games are coming to an end, let's take a look at what's on the roundabout way of the end of the NFL season for either the Houston Texans and the Miami Dolphins. We'll start with the Miami Dolphins after revealing that he has done it again. He has scored his 3rd straight goal in this hockey game for the Maple Leafs. Give it up for John Tavares. Have yourself a night, John Tavares. That's your 3rd goal of the game. Wow, John Tavares is on fire in Toronto. Now, Maple Leafs 5. It is now Maple Leafs 5, Sabres 3. But don't worry, Sabres Nation. Don't worry, Sabres Nation. The Maple Leafs and the Sabres of Buffalo will be seeing each other in days' time after a Wednesday night in Dallas at 7 o'clock, rather 30 minutes after 7 o'clock p.m. That game being recapped on Maple Leaf Post Recap upcoming when we get out of here for Dolphins Post Game. Game score right now as we hit the final 2 minutes and 12 seconds. We have the Dolphins losing to the Texans 20-12. Next for the Dolphins, hoping to get a victory lap. Obviously, no victories for the Dolphins on this end tonight, rather today, but they will try to get another victory against the San Francisco 49ers before the final 2 road games of the season, including a late night action on Sunday Night Football, the last Sunday Night Football of the season for the Miami Dolphins against the Cleveland Browns. They'll be facing the San Francisco 49ers. That game will go head-to-head at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. Catch that game on CBS or wherever you're streaming the game. It's back to where we were before we faced the Texans, and it's back to where the Jets were before they faced their team of conversation this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were able to lose to the Jets 32-25 in favor of the Jets. They're hoping to keep the victories rolling. Next stop, Buffalo, but first stop next week against the Rams. Next week is the Rams for the Jets. The week after that, it's Buffalo, and then Miami. Getting down to the wire of Dolphins post game here on Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. We are now at the hour mark of the program, and we are at the wraparound of Dolphins post game, which means where exactly are the Texans heading into the final 18 weeks of the season, the final 3 weeks of the football season? Where are they headed? Well, we heard Ryan D'Amico Ryan. We heard D'Amico Ryan say that they're on their way to face the Kansas City Chiefs. But where are they headed next week? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's Christmas Day. And who better to celebrate Christmas Day than with Mariah Carey, as we have Netflix on the air for the Kansas City Chiefs next week when the Baltimore Ravens and the Texans kick off at 4:30 in the afternoon on the East Coast. That's right. Note the start time. It's a 4:30 p.m. kickoff between the Baltimore Ravens on Netflix against the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, can they clinch the division today? Did they clinch the division today? If so, there's gonna be a lot to celebrate for the Houston Texans today and tomorrow. First, we gotta get through the next week against the Chiefs before the Texans get to face, well, the Baltimore Ravens. And speaking of the Chiefs, the next match after the Texans for the Chiefs is gonna be none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then it's another match between the Denver Broncos. The last games of the season are all going to be Sunday games, so they're all going to be on Sunday, January 5th, 2025. And the last game for the Texans will be against the Titans. All right, everybody, we are at the end mark. We are pretty much done here at Dolphins Post Game. But if I could describe this game in one word for you for the Miami Dolphins, I would say, given Garrett's carted off the field issue that happened at 9 minutes and 34 seconds into one point of this game, due to the fact that he suffered an injury, I would call this a Sunday afternoon horror in Houston. But in Houston's place, I would say, Houston, our problem has been solved, but can it be solved for the final 3 weeks in the NFL season? I think so, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. The postseason is just 3 weeks away, Dolphins Nation and Houston Texans Nation. But for some of us, the offseason is just 3 weeks away. For the chance to look back at the season and say, how can we be better next season? For most of the teams that have already received the E, it is basically a sign of time to start thinking about how we can improve ourselves for next season. For others who are in the playoffs, it's about knowing where you're playing during the beginning of the playoff and where are you headed at the end of that playoff round? Are you in still or are you gone? Just over 12 seconds left to go in the 48-41 Lions and Bills game. The Bills and the Lions now pretty close right now. It's pretty close right now. It's the only other game on, but I think the Bills are going to win this game. And with that being said, we are getting into time for Bills post game on Sports for Beginners and time for Maple Leafs hockey on the ice and behind the benches. Final score of the Leafs hockey game against the Buffalo Sabres. They take the first meeting against the Buffalo Sabres 5-3 in favor of Toronto in Toronto. Speaking of hockey and the fact that we're sending you off to hockey on the ice and behind the benches, but football is continuing here on Sports for Beginners. Blue Jackets end up losing to the Carolina Hurricanes 4-1. The record now for the Hurricanes, 19-10-1 on the season. For the Blue Jackets, they are 12-14-5. Picking up the loss. Blackhawks come out of a back-to-back, splitting a back-to-back in their favor with a 5-3 victory over the New York Islanders after falling. I do believe they did play on Saturday. I believe they played on Saturday. I do believe it was a back-to-back for them. No, they did not play on Saturday. Yes, they did. They did play on Saturday. They played earlier against the New Jersey Devils, winning that game 4-1. They end up losing this one in favor. Excuse me. They end up winning this one against the New York Islanders 5-3. And in the second period right now, we've got a tie game, 2-2 Vegas Golden Knights over the Minnesota Wild. And we got a 3-0 lead over the New York Rangers with 3 goals scored for the St. Louis Blues. Those games approaching the regulation time period as it stands right now. Phew. 18 weeks feels like a tough game to play, Miami Dolphins Nation on Dolphins Post Game. I know, it feels like a long season, but 82 games is even longer, and anywhere between those big games is pretty long. Just look at the MLB, they play 162 games. And if my math is correct, with December already in progress and we're already thinking about the spring training. If my math is correct, I believe we are just 2 months away now from spring training. All right, the Bills have gone final. It's time now for the keys to victory. We're going to wrap it up with the keys to victory for the Sunday night football game. But before we do get there, as we are at the end of the program, my pick to win against the Vikings and the Bears for Monday Night Football, I will say that my pick to win is going to be the Minnesota Vikings, but I think it's going to be a close game for them. I think it's going to be a close game for them on that one. I think it's going to be a close one for them. I think it's going to be a close one. I'm sure it's going to be a pretty good one to talk about on Bills postgame. We are at the end of the program though on Dolphins postgame, and I like the Atlanta Falcons chances, but my other gut says Dolphins Nation, Las Vegas Raiders by a landslide in the 8:30 game. Before we get to the keys to victory, because it is about time to get ready for Sunday Night Football and about time to get you ready for Bills and Lions on Bills postgame. Maple Leafs and Sabres on Maple Leaf Post Recaps. About time to get you ready for those games on the ice and behind the benches and sports for beginners. I do want to say that I am thinking it's going to be a landslide. I am going to say that the Las Vegas Raiders take care of business and landslide the Atlanta Falcons to a victory, making it 3-11, their record going into Week 16, and 6-8 for the Atlanta Falcons. And like I said with the Minnesota Vikings, I am thinking the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm thinking of it as a close game. All right, Green Bay Packers on its way on Sunday Night Football. The final scores of the late games. The Eagles win against the Steelers 27-13. The Cardinals beat the New England Patriots 30-17. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers smashed the Los Angeles Chargers 40-17. The Bills smashed the Detroit Lions 48-42. Yes, those were the late games. And we got those games. Of course, Tyler Rowland's Titans, they had it in their back pocket. They had the W in their back pocket, but they ended up losing that game, and that kind of burned the Tennessee Titans, but they already knew the season was over. And the Denver Broncos, Houston Texans fans, we didn't even wrap up the show until the game was over, and the game is now officially over. So congratulations, you have not only beat the Dolphins, but you have secured the AFC South Division, and congratulations to you. Congratulations. So much to celebrate for you next week. All right, I am getting into the point where we got to sign off and send it over to Bills Post Game and Maple Leaf Post recap on both Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. We got to talk about the Bills and the Lions, and we got to talk about the Sabres and the Maple Leafs on both separate platforms. We're sending you off to those games momentarily. But here are just the 3 keys to victory for the Seattle Seahawks to either go 9-5 on the season, or the Green Bay Packers to go 10-4 on the season after Sunday Night Football. Key number 1, we heard it being talked about on Miami Dolphins' game against the Houston Texans. You got to maintain possession of the football. I think that couldn't be any further from the truth. You got to maintain possession of the football. Make plays where you have a way of making your opponent think you're going to throw or you're going to run and kind of confuse them. So confuse them is what I'm going to use as the first key to victory for these two teams. The second key to victory would be the key offense and the key defenses. Now, of course, we were seeing some interceptions in the Miami Dolphins game against the Houston Texans. But we will be seeing a Houston Texans and Miami Dolphins game down the road on Dolphins Post Game. Obviously not this season, but maybe next season. I will suggest that if the Green Bay Packers or the Seattle Seahawks want to win this game, I would think that they're probably also going to have their defenses be on high alert for any offensive plays that they can find and say to themselves, wait a minute, I could find that play, I could find that play, I can make a pick, I can get an interception here, or I could fumble the ball. And one thing that I know a lot of us would love is for no penalties to be called in this game. It's very tough to do in the NFL. Just ask every NFL team in the NFL. Very tough to do when you can't have penalties in this game. But I know a lot of us don't like those uncalled penalties. Penalties will happen in this game, just like injuries will happen in this game. And with that all being said, my pick to win on Sunday Night Football, as it is just about 8 o'clock p.m. on this Sunday, December 15, 2024 game. Give me the Green Bay Packers over the Seattle Seahawks by a close margin of 41 Green Bay Packers to 42 Seattle Seahawks. I'm thinking of a safety game. The score will predict itself when we get there. The score will predict itself. My name is Thomas McGregor. Maple Leaf Post recaps coming up on the ice and behind the benches. Next, for all you football fans out there that want to hear the voices of Bills Post Game and the shout song that's going to kick us off into our closing message, sending you off on Sports for Beginners to Bills Lions. The Bills take it 48-42 in favor of the Buffalo Bills. Well, one team in Buffalo wins, the other team loses in Toronto, but we'll see what happened on the next time the Buffalo Sabres and the Buffalo Bills are playing. Shout, get ready to take us out. My name is Thomas McGregor, and this has been Dolphins Post Game. We're taking you out to Maple Leaf Post recap on the other side, on the ice and behind the benches with the Buffalo Sabres and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But God has you the rest of the way, football fans, for Lions and Bills. Shout, we need you. We want to hear you shout. Bills Nation, we're sending you off the Bills Post Game coming up in just a few minutes' time. We're getting you there actually next on Sports for Beginners. And we are telling you all, Dolphins Nation and Houston Texans Nation, to catch us all on next Sunday's matchup for the Dolphins and the Texans. Whether it will be a Saturday match for the Texans against the Chiefs. DeMarco Ryans, we thank you for that on the victory speech. We thank you for that reminder. Except for the Dolphins, we won't play until 4:25 p.m., so maybe we'll get a pregame show on Sports for Beginners for Dolphins Post Game. Definitely have a Dolphins Post Game following the game. That is next Sunday, December 22nd, 2024. And with that all being said, CJ Stroud wins, Tua and Mike McDaniel loses. The attendance record of this match between the Texans and the Dolphins: 71,221 fans in attendance. That was a 1 o'clock game match against the Houston Texans in NRG Stadium with Alex Kemp, the referee, to call the game. Well, that was fun, Houston Texans Nation. That was fun, Dolphins Nation. Fins up. Hopefully we get another club dub against the 49ers. That's going to be the next topic of conversation on Dolphins postgame. But for now, that is it for this one. As I've said, my name is Thomas McGregor, and this has been Dolphins football on Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. Go Leafs Nation. We'll be with you for a Maple Leaf Post recap coming up next. For the rest of you on Football Nation and on Sports for Beginners, I wish you all a great week. We'll see you next Sunday following the conclusion of the 49ers and the Miami Dolphins game. So fins up until then, Dolphins Nation. Our closing message: take us out. Shout, you know what to do.
The Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills are making it happen now. Stand up now, come on and shout. Yeah, 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 yeah. Say you will. Shout it right now, baby. Say you will. Come on, come on. Say you will. Come on and shout. Say you will. Yeah. Shout. Buffalo's happening now. Shout. We're on the move now. Shout. The Bills are happening now. Shout. They're making it happen now. Shout. We got the spirit. Shout. A lot of spirit, yeah. Shout. We got the spirit. Shout. Just watch it happen now. Hey, 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 hey. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. The Bills make me wanna shout.
Scott the other way on Sports for Beginners. Leafs Nation, I got you for Maple Leaf Post recap. Enjoy the football, Football Nation. I'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you so much for listening to Sports for Beginners. If you would like to learn more about the show, you can visit the podcast Facebook page or visit the official website. You can also send us an email at sportsforbeginnerspodcast8231@gmail.com. As we always remind you, it is not goodbye, it is until next time.